Thank you for joining me on my soapbox today. My name is Mindy Prefling, and I am the Client Services Senior Manager for Spencer Ogden, a global energy and infrastructure recruitment agency. As global recruitment experts in energy and infrastructure, we're building an industry that impacts millions. We provide leading recruitment services to our clients and candidates, creating careers to power a sustainable future. The SOapbox Series is a podcast we've launched to have open discussions with thought leaders in the renewable energy industry to discuss the human element behind our industry and the challenges we face in recruiting, retaining, and promoting top talent, especially as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. My guest today is Tanya Martinez, the Director of Development, CAISO for AES Clean Energy. Tanya is a legacy SPower employee and came over to AES Clean Energy as a Director of Development in January 2021 after SPower and AES Distributed Energy merged. SPower was a leading renewable energy independent power producer, and the merged businesses represent one of the top renewables growth platforms focused on accelerating the safe, reliable transition to cleaner energy solutions in the United States. As we've explored in other SOapbox Series episodes, having a diverse team has a marked impact on the business, and Tanya's experience is a great example of just that. Tanya is Puerto Rican, Native American, French, and Irish, and her heritage has provided her a platform to create a policy on tribal outreach that sets AES apart. Tanya is passionate about creating a clean and sustainable approach to energy. Her company, AES Clean Energy, is attempting to do so through innovation. Tanya talks us through her career and the roles she's had to get to the position she's in today. We touch on the importance of speaking up as a woman at work and how clean energy is going to dominate the United States in the future. Tanya, thank you so much for joining me on my soapbox today. I'd love for you to kick us off with a brief introduction to you and to AES Clean Energy.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Mindy. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm a member of the Mi'kmaq First Nation, Puerto Rican, French, and Irish descent. I have been working in the renewable energy industry for over 17 years now, primarily in the utility scale space as an engineering consultant or as a developer, and have worked on solar, wind, and battery energy storage projects. I'm currently working as the Director of Development for AES Clean Energy. I manage our California and tribal energy projects for the company. And AES is a global independent power producer, headquarters in the US. AES Clean Energy is AES's clean energy arm that develops, constructs, owns, and operates projects in the US only. So AES Clean Energy is currently operating in 20 states now, and we have 3.6 gigawatts of projects online with lots of projects in the pipeline.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited to get into some detail around just your career history, and then we can talk a bit more about your work at AES. But I'd love to kind of go back to the beginning of your professional experience. So you said you've been in the industry for 17 years, which is really impressive because that's, I mean, really when solar got started. I actually don't know when solar exactly got started, but you're an early adopter, if you will. So I'd love for you to take it back to the beginning. Does that go back to when you first graduated, or was that soon after?
Mindy, I wanted to get into the industry earlier. I felt inspired during my my bachelor's program in electrical engineering at Northeastern University in Boston. I grew up in Massachusetts, and it was at the end of my my bachelor's program where I felt like I started to get some clarity in what I want to do, and I wanted to work. I wanted to do something for the environment. I didn't know what it was. But at the time, this was 2001, there was no industry, really, not much of an industry. So I kind of took some random jobs upon completing my bachelor's degree. And then I did some volunteer work at the North American Indian Center of Boston before deciding to go back to school and get my master's degree in energy engineering with a focus in solar. I kind of knew I wanted to get my master's at some point. I'm like, hey, now seems like a good time. I thought I was going to get my MBA, but I ended up going for solar engineering instead. And it was during my master's program and working on my master's thesis, which started to guide my path, right? So in grad school, I had to choose a topic for my master's thesis, and I wanted to do something for my community in Canada. I had mentioned in the beginning, I'm a member of the Mi'kmaq First Nation, and my community, or my nation, is actually from northeastern Canada. And my family's from a small reservation up there. It's called Okpigunjik First Nation. And I wanted to do something for my community for my master's thesis. And I wanted it to get funded too, because I knew it was going to be a full-time job for me. So I just, wrote a grant. It got funded. And my topic was to conduct an energy feasibility study for the community. So I looked at solar, I looked at wind, I looked at biomass. And it was actually through this study work that when I started my business, I'm like, hey, let me start a consulting business, do the study for my community, and have them hire me with the grant money, with the grant funding.
I love it.
That I wrote. So that's kind of what kickstarted me into this industry.
It's super impressive. I really love your varied background, both coming from a diverse background as is it Mi'kmaq Nation, you said?
Mi'kmaq, yep.
Mi'kmaq, okay. So I just think it's really impressive how you use that in the beginning, both like your passion and your community, and then also in the environment to find your path into renewable energy. It's really impressive. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about your early career in engineering, because now you're the director of development with AES, but you started in engineering, which there are developers that have an engineering background, but it's not necessarily the norm. So I'd love to hear about your early career in engineering consulting. What was that like for you?
Well, for me, working in development, I've always worked with developers that had a background in engineering. So to me, it was new for me working in development with people that don't have an engineering background. But in my earlier years, so I'd mentioned I conducted this energy feasibility study for my community in New Brunswick. And so the next logical step was to work on an actual project. So can we start over?
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of got a little
yeah. Got brain fart.
I know, brain fart.
Okay, so you started.
Where should I go back to?
We could go back to, you said you were working in New Brunswick, and then your first entree into development was you got to work on a project, right?
Yeah, so the project, the energy feasibility study that I was working on for my community led to a project or a potential project. There's a tremendous opportunity for biomass energy for my community. Well, so the next logical steps were to raise money for that, right? And garner local support. Well, lo and behold, I was confronted with some local tribal politics. And then it was really a new energy resource for the provincial government as well. And I just kept hitting a brick wall. So I ended up getting a job working for a tribal energy consulting business called Red Mountain Energy Partners. It's a Native American owned business based in Arizona. And so I started my trek to the Southwest, working for them, conducting energy feasibility studies for other tribes. It was a tremendous opportunity for me. And then it led me to development, right? I was like, this is nice conducting these energy feasibility studies, but I want to build some projects. So after Red Mountain Energy Partners, I ended up working for a small solar development company called US Solar Holdings. And the company consisted of a small team of engineers. There were like 5 or 6 of us starting out. And the 2 owners of the company have been working in the energy industry for decades, 30 plus years, developing fossil fuel power plants. And naturally, as the industry started to trend towards renewables, they got into renewables, and they brought me on to their team. And they had a wealth of, or they built up a wealth of consultants, right? Top-notch attorneys, top-notch engineers, environmental consultants. They had this whole entourage of companies, contractors to support the development of their projects. And I also worked as an independent contractor for them as well. But yeah, that was an awesome opportunity for me. And then also in my career as an engineer, I ended up working for power engineers. So I realized with US Solar that I loved development, but I'm also an electrical engineer. And I knew one of the biggest challenges on our projects is interconnection. So I'm like, man, I really want to build my capacity on interconnection, right? So I did take a slight turn from development and work for power engineers, conducting interconnections studies for utilities and for developers, and ended up consulting with a lot of other developers, right? Supporting their work on interconnection, gen ties, substation costs, transmission line costs. And then I went back to development. I'm like, okay, I feel like I've got a good understanding of interconnection. And it was actually a nice little tool to have in my toolbox, right, as a developer. And every developer has their own, different strengths, right, in the industry. So
yeah, I would see that. I could see how that would be really valuable. So okay, so you went from US Solar Holdings and then 7th Gen, then back into engineering, doing interconnection at Power Engineers. And then what got you back into development? Because then your next move, I'm having my cheat sheet on LinkedIn. Then you moved on to BayWa to get back into development. What was the impetus there for the transition?
Well, it's so funny how things have happened for me on my career path. So when I was working for Power Engineers, I knew it was only temporary to be conducting these interconnection studies. I knew eventually I'd get back into development. And I also knew I wanted to be in California for some reason. I caught the California bug.
For some reason,
I was
can't
in
imagine
Arizona.
why.
I know, right? And it's like, you never know who's watching you, Mindy, because an old coworker that I'd worked with at US Solar called me up and he's like, hey, I think I've got a job for you here in California working for BayWa in development. And yeah, they actually had a whole team of developers working in Mexico. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. So like I said, I'm Puerto Rican too. My Spanish was okay. I'm like, man, that was another prayer of mine, is to improve my Spanish. So here you go, Miss Martinez, start doing your job in Spanish, working on renewable energy projects in Mexico for BayWa.
That is awesome. What an awesome opportunity.
It really was. It really was.
I love how things really lined up for you, where you got to really tap into your cultural background and use that to your advantage. Or actually it kind of worked the other way for you. You got to use your career to tap more into your roots even.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. Where am I going to next? Oh, actually, I wanted to hear about, being a woman in engineering. That's, not as common as we would like it to be. I think it's improved in terms of the amount of women and women coming into the industry. But I'm curious if you had any challenges being a female engineer in your career.
I've witnessed some female engineers being overlooked by men because they couldn't possibly manage a construction site, for example, being a female. There have been times where men have made some comments to me that may have been considered sexual harassment that it really taught me to speak up, right, and establish healthy boundaries. I think it's all of our responsibilities to foster a healthy work environment that respects all people, right? And oftentimes as women, we overlook behavior, off comments, or brush it off. I mean, I'm guilty of that sometimes. I'm like, oh, that wasn't that bad that he said that, or so-and-so said this. I get, he was just joking around. However, sometimes you just don't know what they're saying or doing to other people. So I think it's our responsibility as people to speak up, whether it's directly to that person, or, I mean, if you feel so inclined to speak to your HR department, because I mean, it does happen all the time. And I mean, I have been in the industry for a little while and have worked with some like old school men in the utility industry and different generations, right? They've talked to and about women in different ways. So yeah, I've just learned how to, respect and honor myself, right? Speak up, say something when I feel, or if I feel uncomfortable. Usually it's directly to the person, but that's been the extent of it. For the most part, I've been very blessed with really great mentors, and I've had just a great career and have worked with some really amazing people, men and women in the industry, that have just, taken me under their wings and shown me the way.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. And I do think a lot has changed in the world the past 12, 15 years. So, hopefully the harassment or unwelcome commentary has gotten a lot less than maybe what it used to be and what women before us maybe experienced. So I'm glad to hear it hasn't been pervasive for you.
No.
So I'd like to now get into your position and your career with AES. So AES and SPower merged in, was it November of 2019 already? Has it already been that long? Or maybe might be getting my dates wrong, but I'd love to hear about your transition from SPower legacy development into the Director of Development for CAISO at AES now.
Yeah, it's been about a year now, Mindy, since the merger, and it's been a great opportunity for me. Again, I did get a promotion with the merger, and we went from 200 people with SPower, and now we're like close to 600 and growing astronomically. It's so exciting, and it's a little chaotic right now. I'm not going to lie with this transition, but man, the opportunities we now have with this merging with AES Clean Energy, we've picked up a lot of, we've gained a lot of new expertise that we previously didn't have with SPower. And so I think we can offer a lot more services that we previously couldn't as SPower, but it's been a great merger of teams, right? SPower has been focusing on developing utility scale projects, and AES Clean Energy has been focusing more so on distributed energy. So it's a nice coupling of companies and merging of some really great teams.
Yeah, that's been my sense. My experience is I've worked with AES for I think probably 3, maybe 4 years now. And I worked with SPower previously, as you know, and that's where we met.
Yes.
I worked with SPower for a number of years too. So, when I talk to candidates, I always sell it as AES is positioned to be one of the largest IPPs in the US with this merger. I mean, with the portfolio of utility scale solar and wind projects that SPower brought, and the massive DG portfolio for solar and storage that AES distributed had prior to the merger. It's a pretty impressive portfolio now for your team to work on. So I'm curious, you're the Director of Development for CAISO, and you said for, what was the other for CAISO?
Tribal Energy.
Yeah.
CAISO Tribal Energy project. I mean, this is relatively new. for AES Clean Energy. And it's just so interesting to me how it's kind of come full circle for me. Like in the beginning, I was working with tribes, and I got out of that for quite some time. And it's so cool to see that AES has a couple of tribal energy projects coming to us right now, and we may work on more projects. And I raised my hand and I said, I want to lead those.
I love that.
Given my background and passion, right? So Miss California and Miss Tribal Energy for AES Clean Energy right now.
I love that. And so for those of us that don't know what project development looks like for tribal energy, and I am one of those people, could you explain maybe some of the differences or nuances to developing projects on tribal land?
Yeah, so I mean, it's similar challenges, environmental challenges, cultural challenges. There's just an additional challenge, right, of working with the local government. And sometimes it entails additional work on the environmental side. Sometimes there's a high or a quick turnover rate with the local governments too. You may have one government supporting you, right, on your project and be pro renewable energy, right? And then they reelect their local government, and it's all new faces.
Yeah.
But yeah, similar to developing projects off reservation, but definitely some unique challenges working on tribal lands.
And so for your participation on tribal energy, is that more of just like of interest to you, or is being Native American, does that give you a leg up and empower you on these projects? Does that help you to communicate with the other, like the local governments, for example?
I think it does, for sure. It is really unique. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's similar to developing projects off reservation, but it is a unique understanding for sure. And that's why I kind of raised my hand for these projects, because I understand that. And yeah, it helps a lot to know, to understand what a lot of challenges, unique challenges that tribes are confronted with.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it helps for sure. And so as I build out my team, right, to work on these tribal energy projects, I have that in mind, right, as identifying the right consultants to work with. Well, first and foremost, I prioritize Native American owned businesses for working on these tribal energy projects, because it is a unique understanding. And if I can't find the tribal or native owned businesses, then I target other consultants and companies that have worked for tribes and have that experience, because it is unique.
Yeah, that's great. So, I talk to a lot of folks about why diversity is important in hiring strategies. And I think this is case in point to why we should empower diverse hiring practices, because if you bring in more diverse talent into the industry, then you can bring a different perspective. And then I think more importantly, you have diversity in thought and approach to solving problems. And it seems like that's really added a lot of value, not only for your own personal, professional development, but for AES and the team.
Yeah, that's right. And also we bring our networks, right? So I was previously working on tribal energy projects, and I built out a really good network when I was working in the industry. And so I'm also able to leverage that for AES, right? And to use the right people and hopefully be successful on these projects, because you want to use the right people as well that are going to be able to get the projects done, right? And work well with the tribes too, because as you probably know, a lot of tribes have been taken advantage of and been used to taking advantage of, and a lot of tribes have their guards up, right?
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
So it's really important for developers to be able to build trust, right, in these communities, and show them like, hey, AES is here to do good business, right, with you. So it's really important to have the right voices and the people to represent your company and your projects when working with tribes.
So when we spoke earlier outside of this conversation, you mentioned that you spearheaded a tribal outreach policy. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so there was a project I was working on in Arizona, large scale solar project of 3,000 acres. It's currently in construction right now. So we conducted our cultural studies on the land, which is standard practice, and there were some cultural findings on the site. However, because the project was on private lands, we had no duty or responsibility to consult with the local tribes. And that just didn't sit well with me as a Native person and a developer. So we decided, myself and my team, to consult and outreach anyways. I know, and I knew the time it was a little difficult for my team to to support this idea, but they did. They're like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this the right way. So we did. We reached out to the local tribes and consulted with them, and they're on site right now monitoring the construction of our project. But it went really well, and it from that inspired this policy. I was thinking, like, man, if this is happening in Arizona, it was a CalISO project. It connects to the California grid. That's why I was working on this project. But I was started to think, like, man, what are my counterparts in other states doing, right? In other states that don't require this outreach to the local tribes on private lands. So my team, the permitting team, everyone supported this policy, right? To step up our game when it comes to consulting with tribes. And I was so grateful for that, to have that level of support, right? Because this is a strong value for me as a Native person, and to have my team embrace that and say, you know what? Yeah, let's do this right on all of our projects. So it was empowering for me to have that support, but also we ended up getting a lot of accolades from others within the company, right? They were so happy to see AES supporting a policy like this. Because, I mean, a lot of people value that, right? Respecting other cultures, right? Especially right now with the movements, these social justice movements, right? People are more aware of how we treat each other, right? Treat other cultures, treat other people. So we got a lot of positive feedback too when we launched this policy internally within the company, because people really do care. They want to do right. And I think it's our responsibility, right, to acknowledge the history on these lands. All of our projects are on what used to be tribal lands, right? And by incorporating this policy and taking the next step to ensure that we're doing this consultation to the best of our ability is the right thing to do, right? It's good for all. We want to develop clean energy projects, right? But we want to do it in a good way with respect to the land and the indigenous people that used to live on that land, right? We're still here, so.
Yeah, that's really incredible. You know, it kind of begs the question how, like, this hasn't been done before, but is it just because there haven't been projects on tribal lands as much, or?
Well, the thing is, every state is different, right? So California has a pretty extensive tribal consultation process. It's pretty cookie cutter, but the whole concept of consultation is kind of vague. It's not clearly defined, right? And every state has their own requirements, right? So in Arizona, which is a very pro-development state,
Yeah,
they're a little more lax, right? So the policy in Arizona is such that if you're developing a project on federal lands, Or if your project has any federal impetus, if you're selling power to the federal government, then you have to consult with the tribes. But if you're on private lands, it's free for all. Do whatever the heck you want, developers. So,
Okay.
so yeah.
I imagine when you're developing, you likely take the path of least resistance. So depending on the
Yes,
state that you're in, if it's not required, then full steam ahead.
exactly.
Okay,
It
I
is
understand.
counterintuitive as a developer, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
exactly, you're trained to take the path of least resistance. But at the same time, we have a responsibility and a duty to be conscious,
Yeah,
right?
mindful of the history and
Yes,
yeah, just I guess that not everybody approaches land the same way. So, I mean, but it sounds like what you came up with is a win-win-win. Obviously for you, because it gave you this opportunity, it gave you a soapbox, right? To come in and, you know, I guess honor your community and your heritage. And then for AES, because this is something that you can now replicate for other tribal lands. And it's good PR, right? I mean, let's be
right.
honest. And
Yep,
then I imagine for the tribe too, because now they get to they're being consulted, not bulldozed.
that's right.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Really cool
Mhm.
stuff that you're doing. So I think, I'm kind of curious on just your opinion on the state of diversity in the industry. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but we ran a survey in 2020, which now seems like ancient history, on the state of diversity in renewable energy, and almost 50% of the respondents said that they felt like nothing had changed or that, in fact, the industry had become less diverse. What do you think?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's changing. It's definitely trending in the right direction for sure. I mean, I see it personally and the work that I've done, or the different companies that I've worked with. And I think even more so too, like I mentioned, that social justice movement that's been happening these past, in the past couple years is really waking people up, right? And people that would never even, that you wouldn't think would ever think about diversity, they're thinking about it and they're talking about it too. So it's really nice to see that. And I was so impressed too with AES when when we merged with AES, right? They right out the bat, they stepped up and said that they're setting goals to meet it, to be more diverse too, and have more diverse hires on the, senior leadership, executive leadership level. So it's really refreshing to see that.
I'm glad to hear that. I've seen it too. I think I've seen both, right? We're in this hiring frenzy. You mentioned AES, even post-merger, you all grew from 200 now close to 600, but that partially was through merger. And I know just because I work with AES so closely, there's just been tons of hiring too. So I'm curious from your perspective with the growth in the industry that we're seeing right now, what do you think is the opportunity to increase diversity?
I think there's a tremendous opportunity to increase diversity, but people have to make the commitment, right? It's got to be in the forefront of your mind, because you can continue to hire people that look like you if you want to. You have a choice, right? During your hiring process. And a lot of people don't realize the level of unconscious biases we all have. But I think it's important to recognize, one, that we all have some unconscious biases. And two, we all have a responsibility to make an effort, right, to create more diverse teams. But it does require an effort on everyone's part, right?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, you know, everyone needs to put their money where their mouth is. We all talk about increasing diversity in the industry, and some companies or some people practice good faith efforts to do that, but we've got to start seeing the change happen. And I agree with you, there has been some changes, but I think it needs to be more, honestly. But my next question for you is going to be, who do you think is responsible for that change?
I'd say everyone in the company, whether you're hiring or whether you're not hiring, whether you're part of a team. I think it helps to come from the top down first, right? When you see your leaders supporting an initiative for diversity, it makes a pretty significant impact. One other technique that AES is incorporating is evaluating. So every year we get evaluated on accomplishing our goals. Well, diversity is part of that goal. So that's part of our evaluation and our bonuses, Mindy. So
Wow.
if we don't meet our kind of unwritten, diversity goals, then it could impact our bonuses. So it's nice to see that AES is literally putting their money where their mouth is on
yeah,
this
I'd say
diversity campaign. But I'd say it's all of our responsibilities. One, to hire, to make an effort to hire more diverse candidates or just diversify our team. Two, make recommendations, right? We all have different networks, and we can just make recommendations for people we know for open positions to increase diversity. And three, just be a role model, right? We're all watching each other and who the new hires are, right? AES is growing like crazy. We're hiring, our goal is our plan is to hire like 200 people, I think, in the next year. And we're watching each other. Who's hiring who, right?
Yeah.
Just last month, there were like 40 new hires with AES Clean Energy, and it was diverse. I was very impressed with the diversity of the new hires. So yeah, we're all role models. We're all watching each other.
Yeah, I like that. No, I love it. Everyone's watching. You couldn't be more right. So I think kind of moving into the future, looking forward, what do you think is the future of renewable energy?
That's a big question,
I
Mindy.
know, I know. It is by design. And you can answer in any direction that you'd like.
Okay. Well, when you talk about the future of renewable energy, what comes to mind, which is the forefront or across the world, right, is our concerns with global warming, right? The impacts of climate change. Climate is changing before our eyes. Like there's so many countries and states just somewhat panicking right now. Like, how the heck are we going to figure this out and dig our way out of this mess, right, that we've created with our impacts to our climate by burning fossil fuels, right, and our addiction to oil.
Yeah.
But I think for renewable energy, I think it's our present and it's our future for a long time, and need as much help as we can get, right, in this industry. And I think that's going to continue for the decades to come.
Do you think that we're actually making the changes that we need to?
I think I was going to say, I think we're doing the best we can, but I don't. Because there's a force against us, Mindy. As you know, there's a lot of money in the fossil fuel industry, and they're all transitioning, right, as much as they can, mostly by force, right? Policy really is driving our industry, the industry to make the changes that we need to make. Could we go quicker than we're currently going? I think so, for sure, but there's a lot of money at stake here.
Yeah.
So
I know. I hope we do something. I mean, I think renewable energy is definitely a major part of the equation, but I agree we need to do more. I mean, just way beyond renewable energy.
yeah, and it's like, how much energy do we waste too? We're a very wasteful culture, American culture.
Oh, don't get me started.
I know, we waste a lot of energy, food, resource, everything, very wasteful. So we could easily cut our demands, I think, in half if we were to make a much more concerted effort with green buildings, and
Mhm.
more energy efficient homes. But
Yeah,
yeah, there's so much more we could be doing, but
yeah, agreed. Well, with that, what do you think is the future for AES Clean Energy?
so for AES Clean Energy, I'd say very busy, very, very busy. AES Clean Energy has some pretty lofty goals in the industry, but I don't doubt that AES Clean Energy won't meet them. AES Clean Energy has hired great leaders, really great leadership. They're committed to the goal, right? AES Clean Energy is actually helping AES Global meet its goals, which is nice to see, which is where fossil fuel companies are trending, right? They're phasing out of this fossil fuel industry to clean energy, and AES Clean Energy will be a big part of that transition for AES Global. And AES Clean Energy is just committed to meet the demands, meet local demands, right? In all these regions where we're doing business.
So with the growth anticipated for AES, what do you anticipate to be the challenges that AES will face with that growth? And I think we could use, there's a lot of different ways you can answer that question, but I guess as it pertains to talent specifically.
Well, as you know, there appears to be a shortage of talent, right? There's way more jobs right now than people in this industry. So I think it'll be important for one, AES to leverage its networks as much as we can, right? We have all these people that have all these other networks and know people that know people. But also, I think we'll have to develop a more robust training program, right? We'll have to bring in people and just train them to work in this industry. Another unique opportunity to AES is the fact that AES has some coal-fired power plant or fossil fuel fired power plants that are being shut down. We'll have a workforce. We're currently transitioning our workforce from fossil fuels to renewables, which is really nice that AES can do that in-house, right? It's such a large company and has created such a diverse market for itself,
Yeah.
right? That we can do that and leverage those people so they're not out of work, right? And they can just transition into renewables.
That's good, because I was going to ask, next what changes you might hope to see managers and corporations make on the hiring front. So, I mean, that could kind of segue. It sounds like giving folks that are working in fossil fuels or other tangential, if you will, industries, could that be one opportunity for positive change?
Definitely. And we may see some policies around it too, or support from the states or the regions where we do business. So we have some projects in Kern County, for example, in California, heavy oil county. That's one of their biggest industries, but also so is renewables. So they're worried about their workforce, right, in fossil fuels and are looking to us, to renewables, to help, transition those people so they don't end up out of work, right? We have to take that into consideration. I know they're knocking on the governor's door in California too, and that's at the forefront of their discussions, right? Considering their current workforce in fossil fuels, right, and how they transition into renewables.
Yeah, I
So.
like that. You know, I meet with you participate in RISE, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Sometimes.
yeah, I go to the leadership forums usually, and back in the day pre-COVID when we could actually go in person, I meet with a lot of individuals that are, and a lot of women who are looking to change from oil and gas into renewable energy, and it's tough. It is so tough. I mean, there's some salary inequity between the industries. I think that is changing as renewables grows, but that's one of the challenges. You know, take yourself, if you got 17 years of experience, then you make a pivot into a new industry. Can you make a lateral move? Probably not. But that I think, I mean, I'm glad to hear that AES at least is um, recognizing that and maybe changing that a little bit in terms of their hiring strategy or moving people internally, giving them a chance.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Definitely.
Well, that really wraps up my questions for today. So Tanya, I want to thank you for joining me on my soapbox. To close out our episode together, I'd like to run a segment called What's in it for me. So why should someone consider joining AES Clean Energy?
They should consider joining AES Clean Energy because it's super exciting. It's a very innovative company. The teams and the caliber of people you get to work with and learn from is they're top notch here, and they're at the forefront, right, of developing these renewable energy projects, and there's a wealth of background and experience and projects as well to learn from as well.
Great. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate your time. I had a lot of fun today.
Awesome. Me too. Thanks, Mindy.